IDW Sonic Issue 2. The story starts out with Sonic running towards a giant spider robot and saying that he doesn't want to let it trample the town. I guess based on last scene, that was never the plan, and it's just there to have Sonic be lured into a trap. Although Eggman could salvage the resources from a destroyed town and use what he did to the town as intimidation material to let other towns rule them, so maybe him or not, Eggman wouldn't care if the town gets sacrificed. Sonic jumps on the various parts of the giant robot, remaining in a blue blur the whole time because he's going fast the whole time, which makes more sense with someone who can move fast than in the games. He lands on some part of it, revs up a spin dash, and suddenly causes explosions to it by spin dashing around the outside of it. And he keeps doing that. If all he does to destroy this thing is use the spin dash again, then there's no excuse for it lasting more than one panel when it already looks like the whole thing is exploding. Sonic saved a town from destruction by a giant animal-shaped robot before in Archie, and it being stopped there was actually creative and interesting to watch, not just Sonic spin dashing. What's the point of showing this then? I thought it was building up something interesting. This should have just been 2 panels at that point. Leave it to this comic to turn Sonic saves an entire town into padding at the start of a story instead of the entire plot, like him fighting the thing. It seems like this could have been removed with nothing being lost. Then there's a creaking sound for some reason, and the cheering crowd wants to run away, and Amy smacks the giant robot with a hammer. Wait, was I seriously supposed to believe that after all of those explosions, the robot was still functional? It was still intact in any way? It was still able to move even by that point? This only happened so Amy could be made to look heroic and say that he was getting sloppy. I assumed that Sonic would actually run into serious trouble and actually need rescuing by Amy. Instead, in a comic that'll be dedicated to making her the new Sally Acorn, she doesn't even get to have a better big damn heroes moment than Tails had. How do you screw this up? He didn't need saving. He clearly could have just turned around and spin dashed it some more. How gullible does he think the audience is? How easily manipulated they think we'd be impressed by Amy after this? Like, how dare she call him sloppy? He did all the work. I'm used to her hitting machines with her hammer. She wasn't even necessary. Sonic X had a much better moment where she rescued Sonic. Sonic was tied up above a pool with dangerous fish in it the whole time. Sonic could have been too restrained to move, and that would justify Amy needing to save him. Like, he could be held in a claw. I could get down with Amy being portrayed with more respect and given competence, but only if she actually is, and it's not just an obvious farce. So this pink background that's trying to celebrate Amy's very typical and useless accomplishment just feels distracting and condescending after this. You could give her a new power, a new magical ability. That would be better for actually establishing that she's more competent. Amy says that she heard what Tails and Sonic did in the neighboring town and hurried over because she just knew he'd stop by here. If this is supposed to be the town that she was busy protecting, it's a shame she didn't start out the story fighting the giant robot, because Sonic caught up to it much faster. If the fight with this thing was in a town, there'd be a bit more stakes than this, where actual civilians would be in danger during the fight. Instead it was in an empty field, the safest possible place. So, what was the name of the town Tails was in? What was the name of the town Sonic saved? Does the writer even care enough to give them names? I guess naming them after the town he lived in, or some towns you heard about in fiction, would be too much effort for him. He claimed he wrote the Unleashed arc because of world building, but if he really cared about world building, he'd care enough to give these towns a name. Sonic says that word travels fast. Why would he bother saying this? Of course word travels fast. The internet and telephones and social media exist. Or did it get brought down by Eggman and Sonic wasn't aware that it got fixed back up recently? He's just stating the obvious. Wasting our time. Sonic clearly wasn't happy to see Amy when she first showed up here. Not appreciating her help as if he knew that it wasn't really needed. So it comes as no surprise at this point that Sonic wants to run away from Amy with a disdainful expression now. So is the story finally going to explain the mystery around what Amy did to make him finally ditch her after all that time ago? Because if he decided to finally do that, why would he get things back to normal and hang out with her again? I guess because she'd force him to hang out with him. It sure was polite of Sonic to thank her for the save too, when it clearly didn't need saving this time. And unlike Tails, she is in so many respects. Amy says she came here specifically to find him, and Sonic teases her that that's to be expected from her. She says that she's always happy to see him, but that's not it. And she wants him to come back to the Resistance. Come back? Sonic says they thought they were all doing cleanup now that the war is over. So that's why he left, because he found that boring. Sonic didn't officially leave the Freedom Fighters in Archie after Robotnik Prime was taken out, and they were entirely focused on rebuilding Mobotropolis, even though he was really bored of having to be on a council. But this Sonic didn't have a Rosie to tell him that he could still be happy with doing the little good things make a difference, and Uncle Chuck's still alive to hug and forgive. So he just left to fight the robot armies, which Archie Sonic would have loved to do instead if he had the choice. So it wasn't because Amy did something really bad to make him say, "That's the last straw, I'm ditching you." It was literally just that he left the Resistance and his friends because he was bored with cleanup. With, actually good things, not just smashing stuff. Really? Amy holds Sonic's hands without his permission while saying this. It's the kind of thing she never did in Archie. But this is a different universe, Amy, so she doesn't respect his consent as much. This kind of thing would be seen as disturbing by everyone if the genders were reversed. But since it's Amy, we have to just forgive it and dismiss it as a harmless visual gag. It's pretty weird to make Amy more selfish like this, though, in a comic where we're supposed to see her as more heroic because she's been fighting Eggman and the Resistance without Sonic, and cared more about that and cleanup than trying to follow him when he took off from it. And she first showed up in a failed attempt at a big damn heroes moment, and yet her character has been taken backwards to before Sonic Lost World. I can't even remember any of the games having her hold Sonic's hands without his permission. Or Fleetway. The worst she did to Sonic there was kiss his cheek one time. This is more like back to Sonic X, where for the most part she was at her most useless. It's a long time to talk about some pointless fan service for Sonic Amy fans, but I had to mention this at least once to address how her character's been rebooted here. Not really pushed forwards. Also, it's not much of a Sonic Amy moment if the affection and love isn't mutual, and will never be because he doesn't really care. Amy says that cleanup was the plan, but she didn't account for just how large the Eggman Empire's army was. The leftover robots are everywhere. Yeah, and Sonic's been destroying them. So what, you're going to tell him, keep doing what you've been doing? She says that the robots are randomly attacking anyone they can find. Yeah, and Sonic's been smashing them whenever he finds them. Her point is probably that her team could provide Sonic with intel as to where he needs to specifically go to smash robots next, instead of running in places where he's not accomplishing anything while people in towns get attacked by robots. How selfish would Sonic have to be that this wasn't his idea then? Wouldn't he be with the Resistance and therefore know what they're capable of, and so he wouldn't have to be told that they can provide him with intel as to where to go? Or she could have a thought bubble saying that the real reason she wants Sonic back is because she just wants him back for herself, because she misses him. That'd be so much simpler and easy to understand. Somehow Amy doesn't convince them when saying that her team would be more effective working as a centralized, organized position. Probably because she was too stupid to just say what I did, that if he doesn't know where to go to smash robots, he won't be smashing them all day, and people will be getting hurt in the meantime. He's been with the Resistance before, apparently. Apparently that was Sonic Forces. So wouldn't he know that her team was effective working as a centralized, organized position? Sonic says no, and Amy asks why, which is cathartic at this point. And somehow, even this isn't done right, as Sonic doesn't explain himself right away, and instead goes off on a tangent, reminding us about the last issue's revelation, that the robots have a leader again that sent them out of town better. Sonic says it's all the more reason for him to hit the road and find out what's going on. Amy should have said in this panel that the reason it's all the more reason for him to come back to the Resistance is that the Resistance could find out the answer faster with their intel gathering technology, which he should know about. He should know what Tails is capable of. So logically, he just doesn't care. She says that Sonic could spend weeks or months going from town to town to look for clues. No duh. Sonic doesn't care. He says it'd be worth it because he'd be saving more folks from Badnik attacks on the way. He's apparently too simple-minded and short-sighted to immediately know that he needs to take out the root of the problem, or villagers will keep getting attacked by organized robots. Not to mention, again, I'm sure most of the time, in most of the day, every day, he's not running into robots to smash them, and he'd get to smash more robots if he was told every town they needed help. Wouldn't he be bored by spending most of his day running and not finding robots to smash? He wants to save more folks. Obviously, the Resistance will be able to tell him how to save even more folks, but Amy's not immediately telling him a convincing argument for why the Resistance would find out where the root of the problem is much faster than that guy could run at Sonic speed. Or why the Resistance would tell him which towns are in danger as they're in danger. She's really bad at making convincing arguments. Wow. He could say that he's using people's computers to Google which towns are currently being attacked. And so, but if no one's seen robots in a town yet, and it's on the way there, like in a field, no one will tweet about it, and there won't be any reports on it. So Sonic won't know to go there until it's either already attacking the town, or he lucks out and stumbles upon it, like here. He could run around saving villages and just have a cell phone that the Resistance could call him with any time they know exactly where he should go. And while it makes sense that he'd never want Amy to be able to call him wherever he is, he could say, I'll agree to having a cell phone so the Resistance can call me if you promise to never call me. While Amy would be annoyed, if she really cared about getting Sonic's help, she would have to agree to it. They could easily come to a compromise right here. Don't expect me to believe Sonic wouldn't have a cell phone or wrist communicator just because of one anime was like that or something. Because Archie Sonic and Boom Sonic didn't have any kind of problem with that. And that made more sense. And Boom Sonic didn't immediately balk at Amy being able to call him whenever she wants, even to ask him to buy food for her. But this is a different Sonic from those ones, so apparently this one has this minor personality difference and hates Amy a lot more, for some reason. So he's back to being insanely antisocial aloof because Sonic X Sonic did that, and so this is more Japanese. This scenario was already done in the Archie Preboot Genesis arc with Sonic and Sally, where she said they need to take out the root of the problem or they'll be fighting Eggman forever. How stupid would Sonic have to be that he need to be told that? Sally might be a bit better at convincing Sonic here. Ugh, just before Amy could potentially convince Sonic properly, some scared civilian runs between them and says they're under attack, because the story needs padding. I always pictured Amy's conversation with Sonic to be at the end of the story. That's where Sonic and Tails' conversation was. Here, it's annoyingly interrupted. It shouldn't have been that hard for Amy to have made a convincing argument really quickly, but not even that was kept simple. So now they'll have to focus on fighting robots. Sonic surprisingly thinks the civilian is panicking about the robot he just defeated when it's outside the city, so she was less likely to know about it, and it's clearly right behind Sonic in rubble. It turns out the giant crab robot was a diversion. It didn't look like a crab meat. They're told that the town hall was turned into a safety bunker, so Amy says to get all the unarmed inside and tells the ones who can fight to go to her. So the town's getting attacked by badniks, and Sonic can just defeat several in one place by moving in a blue blur. But that's just in one small area. The other fighters could be helpful if they were spread out all over the town in different places than Sonic. Even then, wouldn't Sonic be able to beat all the badniks without any of their help? How big is the town? Sonic can move it over 700 miles an hour. Why would someone with reaction times fast enough to handle Sonic's speed in the first place ever need to slow down while searching a whole town for badniks and jumping through them? It seems like Amy's wasting her time, because Sonic should be able to beat all the badniks before they could deal any damage, and civilians wouldn't need to be rescued by anyone but him. If Sonic's so fast, it'd be more natural if he already won by the time she was... How and why did Sonic let any badniks get past him? He could spin dash through them and jump out of it and keep running. If the story was going off logic, only Sonic would get to be all that useful. These other people are firing lasers at the robots, but they aren't necessary. They'd only get to defeat a few robots. The story can't show off how they'd be really useful, the other people than Sonic, if Sonic's there anyways, making all of them redundant. It's a miracle they're getting a chance to do anything. Sonic speaks for the audience by saying that he thought Knuckles was the commander of the Resistance. And Amy says that she was the one who kept things actually organized. And Knuckles couldn't because he was the leader of the Chaotix and Archie just fine. What does she even mean by organized? She's not organizing stuff by alphabetical order or color, so she doesn't mean that type of organized. Isn't it the literal job of a commander to keep things organized in the other way? Why the hell is Sonic just standing there near Amy instead of continuing to run through the town and spin dashing through badniks? Amy can be talking to someone else. She says there's too many badniks and they'll be overrun. So they need to find where the badniks are coming from and thin their advance so the villagers can stand a chance. Which Sonic could have done by himself. Sonic could have figured out where they were coming from on his own after running around the town. Instead of Amy saying that she has a way to figure out where the badniks are all coming from other than that, like by providing a bird's eye view of the town to see where the majority of badniks are, which Sonic could have discovered himself, Amy just takes his hand and they boost the robots. So Sonic could have done that himself. She's contributing nothing. The villagers should have been told by their own militia to gather at the town hall. They shouldn't have needed Amy, an outsider to the town presumably, to tell them to do this. If they didn't have such respect for her, they'd be like, why are you telling us how to do our jobs? I hope the comic doesn't just settle for making Amy the smart one and Sonic the dumb one to make Amy relevant and just leave it at that, because that'd be lame and lazy. That's clearly not enough, or acceptable. Sonic has tons of smart moments in the series. I don't see how Sonic actually needs Amy. Sally could have the same criticism with her in general, of course, that maybe Sonic could have come to her conclusions on his own and found stuff out without her, instead of artificially being given an intelligence downgrade to make her relevant. You'd think a writer who hates SADM would be inspired to avoid its mistakes at all costs, not retread them with a different character, when he's trying to be better than it and go for a part of the fanbase that he hasn't permanently alienated. The appeal of IDW seems to be that it's like the games, not SADM, but it's still introducing a problem that SADM had that the games didn't. Oh, I like saying that Amy's holding her hammer out and that's why she's smashing the robots in the pink blur and contributing, while Sonic's in the blue blur running with her. She's not actually just being dragged behind him doing nothing but adding to his boosts. Oh, and then he throws Amy at a robot. Couldn't they have just kept running? Isn't this still an open field, which is a place where they wouldn't have to stop running through the robots? I can understand them stopping with the running if they have to fight robots in a small, cramped space like an alley, or at the bottom of a hill or sloping road where they'd fall down it if they were running on it. Then they'd have to slow down and stay in one place to fight the robots, or they'd run past them, or into the wall surrounding them, or fall down a hill. But these panels are not giving me any indication of their surroundings until after Sonic catches Amy. They just seem to be fighting in a grassy field. It's nice to see them agree with each other that this is fun and fight robots together. That's something Sally barely did. Sally would just go, "How is this fun? This is serious, we have to stay focused." Amy's actually fun. I like that she can smack the ground with her hammer and that alone can create an explosion in front of her. Amy says that Sonic could do this all the time with the resistance. Sonic goes out of his way to be a dick and just says no, and gives absolutely no reason whatsoever for why he's saying no and trying to stick with his idea. It just looks like he's immaturely trolling her. It could be that, like I've been thinking the whole time, Sonic clearly doesn't need Amy's help and could do all of this alone. Because she's talking like this is something he could only do with the resistance. But it's not. He says that he's already told her what he's going to do. He's saying that like he's going to do something completely different than this, and this is a detour. But he was going here anyways. But apparently, Sonic isn't fast enough to destroy all the badniks in or heading for a town by himself without taking the entire issue to do so. What I'm saying is that he needs people around fighting the badniks too, or he'll take longer to beat them all and civilians will get hurt. Except every town is a militia of its own, apparently. He doesn't need Amy. The majority of the people fighting the badniks in towns are the militia, and Amy's just one extra person. So without her, he wouldn't notice a difference. Other than the fact that he wouldn't have a friend to talk to, and he clearly doesn't care about that. Instead of saying that he doesn't need her to do this, Sonic says he already knows what works best for him. Why? Why isn't he explaining himself? He's got terrible communication skills. Could any Sonic be worse at that than Sonic X Sonic? This story would be a lot worse for me if I was just reading it and not explaining it. Sonic says he knows what works for him, and as for what works for his friends, he's no good at figuring that stuff out. Was he a sociopath? It can't be that hard. He knows his friends. How could he not know them? He doesn't have to figure it out. He just has to get told. Told what they want. He says that's Amy's thing. Amy asks if he'd do it for his friends, and Sonic says that they've got her. Even though she's known for not being nearly as competent as Sonic. You'd think it'd be the reverse. Usually you'd expect Sonic to be the one that his friends need, not Amy. She should be saying that his friends need him. But Sonic would say that they clearly don't if they're all alive and well after he apparently abandoned them for who knows how long. Like he's just as bafflingly out of character antisocial as Sonic Chronicles had him. I hated that there too. Maybe because the vast majority of Sonics aren't like that and can't be. Archie Sonic didn't abandon all of his friends after Robotnik Prime was defeated or after Eggman went nuts for a while. He stayed and celebrated with them. Because he likes his friends. He doesn't just think of them as nuisances that he has to be bribed with a chili dog to stay with. I guess Sonic abandoned his friends without them getting the chance to say that they'd bribe him with chili dogs if he stayed with them. And he doesn't even get called out on it. His friends don't feel hurt that he left them for no reason. Tails was still on good terms with him. The writing's so lazy he doesn't even bother to explain how long it's been since he was with the Resistance. It'd be so easy to say, a month. In Sonic Chronicles, Knuckles told him, "You're not the boss anymore, Sonic." And Tails says, "You've been gone a long time." Tails was happy with Sonic last issue, so I guess his friends didn't miss him. This Sonic seems like such an asshole. Apparently he ditched his friends, makes absolutely no attempt whatsoever at explaining why, and Amy doesn't have the slightest clue after all this time, even though she knows him. How can it not be frustrating to see someone with such blatant disregard for his friends' feelings? I can believe that he'd want to ditch Amy and Knuckles, but Tails? What the fuck? He'd want to visit him at least. Tails wasn't acting distant from him last issue. You'd think he would be, since he'd want Sonic to be there for him, like he's the only parental figure he has. If they explained that he only stopped hanging out with Amy and Knuckles because they're Amy and Knuckles, I could accept that. I could accept him thinking of them as just nuisances he never wanted around. But the Resistance would include Tails, so the idea that he thought of Tails as an expendable nuisance in his life is what pisses me off. He raised Tails himself. He's like a son to him. He only calls him Little Bro because he's a teenager. It looks like Amy convinced him and he just put up the token resistance and used a chili dog bribe as an excuse to agree to join her to mess with her, because Sonic could just buy a chili dog anytime he wants. If he doesn't have the money, well, how is he keeping himself fed the whole time he was alone without money? So he has to have been paying reward money the whole time, and then he could have spent that on chili dogs. So why on earth would a chili dog work as a bribe for Sonic when he could buy one himself? He could run over to a chili dog stand in 2 seconds and buy one himself much faster than the time it would take to walk over to one with someone else. So you think he'd tell Amy that? Sonic says that an enemy dropship is just outside the village with plenty aboard. Couldn't Sonic just go to it and smash the robots faster instead of going to Amy? This is the kind of problem he wouldn't have if he was off on his own. He could tell Amy this, and tell him that every second he wastes standing there and talking with her is a second where a robot could be hurting someone or causing collateral damage. So he could phrase his being alone as the right thing to do, the more moral, compassionate option, as it's better for him to be lonely than get people hurt talking to his friends. What the hell? Why does Amy say there's no way they can get through that crowd? They can clearly run out robots and smash through them that way. Why would she suddenly lose faith now? Sonic says it's time for a croquette bomber, which is apparently the official name for Amy smacking Sonic and robots when he's in Spin Dash form. That's a very weird name for it, so I'll probably forget it. But anything is better than Amy smacking Sonic with a hammer when he's in Spin Dash form attack. That takes so long to describe that it's tedious. Amy doing this isn't even interesting anymore. She's done this before. Didn't she do this in the Sonic X comic? Hasn't she done this in Sonic Mega Drive Special The Next Level? Didn't Tails throw Sonic in Spin Dash form before, too? This is the most obvious generic idea for a combination attack with the two of them. The previous one was more impressive, where she ran with him with her hammer out, because I've never seen that before. I don't know how it took so long. And that attack lets Sonic just keep going, not inconveniencing him at all after it starts. And there's the obvious problem with this of, why isn't Sonic getting hurt from Amy smacking him with a hammer here? He'd hate it if she did that in another context. We're forced to assume he has rings protecting him, or else he'd just get killed by this. You'd think he'd hate this attack and refuse to use it because it'd be painful for him, not to mention embarrassing. There's an explosion and Sonic's seen covered in soot and is somehow happy and compliments Amy's shot when she knocked him right onto the power cell. Why is he laughing from that? Wouldn't he be in pain? I guess his rings only have him being in pain for an instant before they start healing him, so of course he wouldn't care. Sonic casually says that he'll be going now. So he really won't be joining Amy just for a chili dog. So why'd he say now you're talking? Why doesn't Amy still think he will be joining her for a chili dog? Why doesn't she complain that he's going back on that and require him to explain that he could buy one for himself at any time? If he was in pain after Amy smacked him with the hammer and complained about being covered in soot and stuff, that would justify better why he doesn't want to stay with her, because he'd be like, ow, that hurt, we make a terrible team. What were you thinking? I thought they had to fight an entire army of robots. I thought she was like, we could never make it through that crowd. Did that destroy all of them? That was quick. Sonic says that to just keep moving and saving people by his own way is what he does. But he's not decent enough to explain the practical, intelligent reason for why he should do that and why it has any benefits. He's literally just coming off like he wants to do this because he likes it. He'd only like it if he was just that antisocial. Because if he was doing it just for the practical reason, he'd explain it, to brag about how smart he's being. How could you honestly say the Resistance are his friends if he's gladly choosing to not hang out with them? At that point, they're more like acquaintances he happens to like chatting with on occasion. He'd only save them because he'd save anybody, not because he has any real emotional attachment to them, or else he'd refuse to ditch them because he'd miss them. So if he really liked them, he'd be happy to fight alongside them, because he'd have them to talk to. Why the hell is Amy love-struck at him saying this? Wouldn't you think he's being incredibly selfish and insulting to his friends because he doesn't want to hang out with them, and that has to be for a reason? It was obvious right from the start they didn't want to hang out with them because of their own personality flaws. It should have been a conclusion that she came to after he left. She might deny it though because she'd be hurt and offended at the idea that he's leaving because he doesn't like them for what they can't help about themselves. It's not like it's explained that he left the team because he had a huge fight with Amy and Knuckles because he finally got tired of their flaws. For the same reasons the fan base has. Amy says that he's right, and he's like, I am? How would he think he's wrong and still go with it? Amy says that's just who he is and is all the reasons that she loves him. So she doesn't want to change him and can't. Which Sally should have said, instead of trying to force him to act like someone he's not and 25 years later, for decades on end. This is the second reason she's a better love interest. But at least Sally was allowed to have a shot with him. At least Sonic was allowed to reciprocate her affection, while Amy is the definition of pointless in that regard. She doesn't count as a love interest if they'll never get together anyways. Sonic is like, I am? And that makes me think that it's annoying when even the character in the story has better expectations of what's logical than the writer does. Because even he doesn't think this makes sense. Amy spent the whole story not liking Sonic for who he is. Sonic says that's not all or nothing, and uncharacteristically tells her that she could always come with him. I thought part of the whole reason he was on his own was to be away from her. So now he's attached to her? Why did he ever leave her in the first place then? How could he want to? Unlike Fiona with Scourge, Amy says that she can't come with Sonic to be alone with him because the Resistance needs her to keep everything in order, and she's been away too long as it is. Fiona would have never felt needed in the first place. Sally was there for that. It's completely out of character for Sonic to say this to Amy. Maybe he's only saying this because he knows that there's no chance of her agreeing for this very reason. And so he's only saying this to make himself look generous. But Amy just held his hands against his will, ignoring his consent. He wouldn't be in a good mood right now. Unless he appreciated it, but then why wouldn't he have started dating her? He's supposed to be cool, so a cool person wouldn't be shy like that. He just gladly want to date someone. Like, if he appreciated her holding his hands, why would he ever have left her? Amy tells Sonic that if he doesn't mind getting some direction, Knuckles went to investigate a town to the south, and since she hasn't heard from him, he might need help. Despite making a big deal of the fact that he does his own thing, Sonic salutes her and calls her Captain Commander Rose. Just after trying to show good chemistry with Sonic, Amy shows horrible chemistry with him because instead of really appreciating this sweet gesture of his where he finally acknowledges respect for her as a leader, Amy says, "Don't make me slap you." He was teasing her, but still, it came from a good place, obviously. Nobody liked when Sally slapped Sonic, and yet Amy can just casually threaten to slap him. Oh, it's no big deal. No, she can get away with anything. One of the biggest problems with the story is that it's never showing off why Amy's a good leader to the Resistance. She just tells the militia to gather the civilians in the town hall when that's probably already happening, and was obvious common sense anyways. Anyone could have thought to tell the civilians to get to safety. I could have done that. This story severely suffers from show don't tell. It's getting you excited to see how exactly Amy is good at keeping her team organized and figuring out what her friends want. But we never see that. We just have to take her word for it, and I'm sorry, but no. I can't do that yet. She has the exact same design as the Amy from the games that nobody has ever taken seriously. It's bad marketing to do this. If you want to reinvent Amy Rose, a more competent girl character who fully realized her potential, giving her a new outfit is obvious. It's a minor thing, but it goes a long way towards showing us the entire comic that this isn't Amy from the games with all of her baggage keeping from taking her seriously. It's IDW Amy, who can be taken seriously. Fleetway Amy could be a great leader too, and I genuinely took her seriously. She earned my respect as soon as she convinced Captain Plunder to help fight Eggman. And this was after she acted worse than Amy ever did in the games by telling everyone she was Sonic's girlfriend. But what helped with making me forgive her and take her seriously was her different design. The story ends with a guy in the chair being mad that Sonic's going off his projected path because he underestimated how much Amy Rose had grown, when he shouldn't have been cut off from how Amy was being. It's not like she went to a different dimension from him after Sonic Forces and just came back. She's been here fighting robots the whole time. And who cares if Sonic's going off his projected path? He's going to danger anyways. So is this guy Eggman or not? Because Orbot and Cubot are working for him and calling him boss. But they could have been reprogrammed to want to call Metal Sonic that. It'd be pointless to hide him from us if he's just Eggman anyways. Which would imply the comic didn't even have the guts to have a pointless surprise. This issue is by Ian Flynn, and was yet another story where Sonic saves a town from a giant animal-shaped robot. But the fight's lame this time because he beats it with just spin dashing, with no creativity at all at the start. Because it's a diversion while the real threat to the town is Badniks. So it's really just a story where Sonic and Amy beat the Badniks to save a nameless town. Which has also been done before. These guys die in one hit. At least the fight with the Super Badniks required skill. That makes issue 1 look fantastic by comparison. And Sonic and Amy have a tedious argument together, having no communication skills at all, which makes both of them frustrating, when you could easily have their arguments make sense, and they just don't. That's the whole story. I don't think I can honestly say it's a good story if their argument pissed me off for most of it. I just can't get behind Sonic being like this, when no matter what, it's going to look extremely out of character for Sonic to refuse to come back to a group of freedom fighters when he was part of freedom fighters with no complaints in RG, SatM, Underground, and Sonic the Comic, and even in Sonic Boom, his friends could be considered a resistance against Eggman. And he didn't object to hanging out with them every day. He lived in the same house with his friends in Sonic X. He didn't insist on getting his own place. He didn't refuse to hang out with his friends in the Dreamcast manga. He hung out with Tails all day in every episode of AOSTH. So what the hell is this Sonic's problem? Just like him being emotional, this isn't just an Archie thing, it's an everything thing. Even the Sonic 1 manga had Sonic get overly emotional. He got pretty worked up over Eggman putting animals into badniks and said he wanted to beat him up for it. Sega Japan isn't against that. Because he doesn't explain why he wants to be on his own, he just looks like an asshole. Isn't being a loner modern Shadow's shtick? He's like, I want to be a lone wolf, and you're weak if you rely on your friends. So I'm gonna be off on my own game, instead of sticking with my friends the entire time. That can't go wrong. It's just as inexplicable as it was in Shadow the Hedgehog. At least with Shadow, they're honest about the fact that this is who he is now, that's the point of his character. Here, they're lying to me that this is always how Sonic's been. I always remembered hearing about the story's plot before I read it, and I remembered it as, this was the first time there was a resistance, and so of course Amy was asking him to join it now because it was brand new. But apparently Sonic actually abandoned it before and is being asked to come back, which is even more baffling. I remembered it wrong because wrong was actually more logical and intuitive than this. When the franchise has been going on for decades, its various iterations will create a precedent standard that will make you look very strange if you contradict without even trying to justify it. This is just who IDW Sonic is, but why? Being different is usually good because it means it's being original and creative, and this sets Sonic apart here, but if it's not going to explain why it's happening, that's just going to piss people off, when I was willing to give it a chance and hear him out. Even Fleetway Sonic wasn't as frustrating as this version of Sonic. The only time Fleetway Sonic ever left his freedom fighting group was for one issue to try to protect them from himself because he blamed himself for Johnny's death, since he was getting his friends in danger all the time. Then he immediately came back because he realized, no duh, they wouldn't stop getting in danger without him. IDW Sonic doesn't even think about this. Even with the one Sonic who's only famous for being a jerk, the only reason he'd ever leave his friends was to try to protect them, for their own good, and he comes back because he cares about them. This Sonic can't even figure out what's good for his friends. If you're going for a Sonic this self-absorbed, you have to have someone point that out and call him out on how he's so selfish, so we know it's an intentional flaw of his that makes him an anti-hero, and not something we have to love and accept or else we're the bad guys. Maybe the rest of the comic is going to prove me wrong and show him actually caring about his friends when it gets right down to it, in moments where he can't say he's just faking it and lying or only doing it because he thinks he can't get away with not doing it. Because they aren't there to see his reaction, and he goes save them when he has nothing to personally gain from it and is just putting himself at risk. Maybe that's the kind of thing that would prove he's a good person, because I honestly don't see how he is right now. If you want to establish a character as a good person, and therefore a likable person, destroying things and technically saving people as a side effect of that isn't as effective for a hero as making him do good through the little things that he doesn't have to do, showing common decency. Like when Sonic hugged his uncle and forgave him when he was mad at him for keeping a big secret from him. He could also do something like, I don't know, help fix Amy's broken music box. And finally, it's a minor thing, but it always struck me as so rigidly metalogic and fiction-y that the first friend of Sonic's that Sonic reunited with in IDW itself is Tails, because he came first, and then he met Amy, because she came right after him in Sonic CD, and next story he's going to reunite with Knuckles because he was after Amy. What are the chances of that in-universe? And they're all in separate places, when we already went through this in the reboot's beginning. This is a brand new continuity. He could have easily been meeting them for the first time, and that would make it seem a bit more justified that he's meeting them in chronological order. Because it could be a fresh new start. It seems like obvious padding to stretch it out to multiple stories that is one character at a time, making multiple stories out of something that can be effortlessly done in one story. Sonic was with all of his friends at once in the first story of Archie. It's not like his friends are each really deep, interesting characters that need an entire issue dedicated to them in Sonic to fully establish who they are as interesting people, making this justified. They're just one-dimensional characters you get right away. Amy's a hammer girl, wants Sonic at her side.